get up there.
Thanks very much, Nicole. I'm very excited to be here. This is my first Transformative Conference. And first of all, I want to congratulate Nicole and give a big round of applause to you and your team for really an amazing first day, a very, very interesting and diverse program. And I've really enjoyed sitting through all the talks. It's been tough to find time to go out to one-on-one meetings because I just want to stay here and hear all the amazing speakers. So great job. Okay, panelists, please. So we have Zack Lynch from Jazz Partners, Steve Curtis from Elevation Capital, Mike Edelhart from Joyance Partners, and Tim Chang from Mayfield. And I got the honor of facilitating this very distinguished panel. I'm actually the rookie investor here, so maybe it's a good thing that I'm mostly asking questions. You guys are mostly giving the answers, but hopefully I'll be able to also chime in a little bit from my experience at Joy. So we have 45 minutes, if I understand correctly, and I'm going to stick to some of my notes here because it's actually 3 a.m. right now where I live in Tel Aviv, and I want to make sure that I remember everything I wanted to say. So the goal here for this panel, as I see it, is first of all to share some insights to the audience about investing in the various types of transformative technologies that we're all investing in, and then hopefully also to give you guys a chance, all of us a chance to talk a little bit and share a little bit about our own funds and what areas we focus in or what we're excited about. So we'll get started, and we hopefully can go through a lot of questions, so let's keep our answers brief. And I'll start with a question that I'll pose to everybody on the panel, which is, being that this is an emerging industry or emerging area, do we have a unique role as investors in this space beyond just writing the checks? Who wants to start?
Yeah, happy to chime in. Capital is the lifeblood that helps form companies and gives them resources, but beyond that, I think as investors, our job is to bring whatever insight, networks, know-how, resources from other learnings of other companies to founders in this young space and to help kind of nurture. It's really about ecosystem building, not just writing individual checks.
I would expand on that to say that it's important for us as investors to have vision in this space. I approach this because we're facing some pretty serious existential threats, which can be huge opportunities. And so for me, it comes more from a place of passion and creating change.
Yeah, I think to sort of add on to both of those, when you're working in a new space like this, it's absolutely critical that the development of these companies develop in a more co-evolutionary fashion, because these ideas are so new and the markets are new. That ideas, might become a seed, might become a seedling, could become a tree, but what we all want are forests that overtake, whatever ecosystem that we're trying to develop. And that's a give and take between the entrepreneur who has the vision and the capital that seems to, provide some of the fertilizer to make that happen. But in a new space like this, it really does require that co-development relationship.
Yeah, and I'd say the money is just an ante. It's just a reason for the entrepreneur to spend time with us. It's a commitment that we make to what we're hearing from the entrepreneur. But what really matters the most is the listening and the giving, taking particularly in something as new as this, to try and understand what the entrepreneur sees and why they feel that might be really valuable.
Yeah, and what we're trying to do also in Israel, similar to what's being done here, is really creating that knowledge-sharing platform, because it's such a young industry that we believe there's a lot of value in entrepreneurs working together and sharing information and sharing experiences. And you spoke before, I think, Nicole, about about sharing. What did you call the failures? You had a very positive way of first attempt at learning, exactly. So we believe very much that we can, provide that platform for people to share and develop together, and we're doing that through also various activities in Israel. Okay, so let's maybe have some individual questions to each one of you. So I'll start with Tim. So your fund is celebrating its 50th anniversary this year, and you guys invest in both enterprise and consumer companies, and you focus on people first as a primary filter when you make investments. You have a very diverse consumer portfolio, including companies like Lyft, but also a bunch of fitness and wellness companies. Are there any learnings that you can take from sort of the non-wellness space that you can, or from the more, let's say, experienced verticals and bring to the new field of wellness and other transformative technology areas?
Yeah, sure. I spent a lot of time. I co-lead the consumer practice at Mayfield, and some of our pillars that we've invested in traditionally have been e-commerce and marketplaces. So marketplace dynamics is a really powerful one there. Poshmark, Lyft, these are examples of marketplaces, network marketplaces, really. Those have some really powerful dynamics in terms of scaling out ecosystems and bringing supply and demand together. And then the other area I'd say is subscription commerce, which ties closely with repeat purchases, replenishables, and then coaching. And that is, to me, is a core area, I think, of the transformative technology world, because what we're really talking about is changing behavior and really changing consciousness and changing minds. And the thing about changing behavior is it's really hard. And so all the habits from gamification, habit design, engagement engineering that you'd get from the work of BJ Fogg or Nir Eyal and creating habits, those all apply. Trigger thresholds for action, creating sustainable repeat habits, coaching, cohorts, in-person, offline, digital, all those sorts of things kind of tie together as enablers for that. Most powerful business models I've seen in this area tend to be where you're helping people to become the aspirational selves they want to be. Because the thing I find that really motivates behavior change, it's either aspiration or desperation. There's not much middle ground. And so you're catching people when they really want to biohack themselves or become an Ironman runner or whatever it is, or they got the oh shit moment from their doctor, meaning you're going to die in 10 years unless you change your behavior. In between that, people don't change. And so it's all of those motivations, those behaviors, those habit-forming techniques that you have to leverage when you're trying to transform people up level their consciousness.
Miri, can I jump in
yeah,
there? Because I think, Tim, you bring up a really beautiful point. Some of these markets are on such a bell curve, right? And you're talking about sort of the top 10% over here and the bottom 10% over here. How do we bring this technology to sort of that middle of the bell curve, which is the sort of main market? I mean, that's one of the challenges that all of these transformative tech companies face, right? And so what have we learned, from other established industries about infecting the world with these qualities of good and positive attributes. So I think something, as investors, that's what we're constantly looking at when we're looking at these different business models.
And while we have you kind of already
Geared
in
up.
motion, so you've been actually, before when Nicole was introducing me, I thought she was actually starting to introduce you, because you've been actually building this, tracking and sort of convening and analyzing the neurotech industry in the States for many years, even before I jumped on that boat in Israel. And you've been supporting the industry. And currently, you're as an investor focusing on unlocking human potential. And you've also built a very impressive portfolio at Jazz. And you're investing in a lot of technologies that are still not, completely ripe, or they're still emerging, and things like digital therapeutics and VR and AR, BCI. What gives you such confidence in these innovations, and where do you see things going?
Yeah. Well, I mean, first of all, Miri, it's great to be here with you, because Miri and I were together in Tel Aviv 2 days ago. So it's 3 a.m. for me as well. So if you see us nodding off here, just feel free to kick us. Jazz Venture Partners is a relatively new fund for those of you who aren't familiar with us. We haven't been around for 50 years like Mayfield. But we have raised 2 significant funds and are now, looking at deploying several $100 million into this space. And part of that is, around the theme of human performance technology. And when we talk about human performance technology, what we really mean by that is the convergence of emerging digital platforms, whether that's machine learning or artificial intelligence or AR or VR or video game technologies, eye tracking, facial recognition technology. You get what I'm saying, right? Biosensors, all of that, but being informed by validated science, specifically around neuroscience, mindfulness, behavioral science. And at that convergence point, what we're seeing is the emergence of new products and platforms and services that enable individuals and teams and companies to disrupt massive market opportunities. So this includes health and wellness, which are sort of obvious, but it also includes things like learning and training, sports and entertainment, HR, autonomous vehicles. And it's at that convergence point that you're beginning to see a lot of opportunities. So to your question, when I look at a company like a prescription digital therapeutics company, which is how we like to invest in this area, we're looking at a pathway, a market model that is well known, biotechnology and pharmaceuticals. They're regulated entities, they're regulated products, and the products that get through that process are clinically validated, and then they can be reimbursed on the back end. And so when we've invested in companies like Pear Therapeutics, Keeley Interactive, Mahana Therapeutics, and we've got a couple of other prescription digital therapeutics companies in the pipeline, what we're talking about there is taking something very novel, which is a PDT, a prescription digital therapeutic, a software-based treatment option, not a drug, not a medical device, but pure software, an app that goes through the FDA process that gets approved to treat a disease. 3 or 4 years ago, it was visionary. No one had ever done it. We made some investments in Pear. We made some in Keeley. And lo and behold, just last September, Pear became the very first company ever to have an app approved by the FDA to treat a disease. And in this case, it's the disease of substance use disorder. And what it shows is if you use the cognitive behavioral therapy app, which has 60 different multi-modules within it, over a 12-week time period, you can double your chances of staying abstinent from your drug of choice, whether that's methamphetamines, alcohol, nicotine. It's quite incredible. No drug on the planet's ever been able to touch that disease that way. So that's an example of just one area where we're seeing a lot of traction, a lot of interest, and the opportunity is, while I'm inside of it, and I think some of us up on this panel see these as, oh, it's kind of obvious to us, it's just the very beginning. This is like the biotechnology industry was 35 years ago, where there were 3 or 4 companies, and there's yet to be formed Genentech and Amgen and Biogen. But I think we're on that cusp today because of the evolution and development of all of these different transformative technologies, if you will. But from our investment perspective, the way that we're seeing initially to infect the world with this sort of positive outcome is through a very regulated process where the business models are well known. So that's how we get confidence, is understanding the business model and then taking an application of the technology sort of the next step.
Thank you. Anyone want to add to that, Mike?
Well, we are a little different than some of the funds up here in that we're around to help companies at the very beginning, what we call the moment of inception. So to some degree, we're here to see ideas, to see science, to see teams at a state long before most of the other funds would get involved, and to some degree help those companies begin to grow and develop so they become interesting to other investors up here and other investors around the valley. And I guess, as an individual, I'm a little different too, in that Mayfield has been around doing this kind of thing for 50 years, and I've been around doing it for nearly that long, which means I was actually doing this kind of thing when the IBM PC came out. I was actively involved in the internet before hardly anyone ever heard of it. And when we saw the emergence of the new behaviors from the rising generation, I'm a co-participant in my own health. I'm a co-participant in my own life. I'm a co-participant in everything. And some of the remarkable changes in science that are essentially taking activities that have only existed inside hospitals, inside laboratories, inside these walled universes of expense and fear and all of that, and bringing them out into the real world to a point where they're ambient. We have companies we're looking at that could be listening to my speech now and telling me in the background or someone else in this room what my emotions are without anything between me and the air and that AI. To us, that's bigger than PCs, much bigger. Bigger than the internet that we're all on today, much bigger. There wasn't anything we could think of that would be bigger than the potential to help human beings be more healthy, and by being more healthy, have a greater potential to achieve happiness. And so we created a fund to respond to that.
How do you define the vectors of happiness?
Well, so one of our fund, Joyance, we say is focuses on the technological vectors of happiness, which is a nifty phrase. But you got to say something. But what the fact of the matter is that technology really isn't the mechanism for producing happiness. The science says everybody knows what makes us happy. The curious thing is that knowing it, human beings don't actually act in the way that makes them happy. It's referred to as, it's a form of forgetting. And we judge what's going to happen in the future, what we think is going to happen in the future. And we do all kinds of crazy things, chase money, chase possessions, chase one another, do war, all this, but when we all know what makes us happy. And it comes from other people. What science can do, and what science is doing more and more, is help deliver what we call delightful moments. That's part of every human civilization, just that little step away from the humdrum daily norm. Yoga, the endorphins from running, the satisfaction of the smell of single malt scotch, the transcendent impact of opera. Did that one sound personal? That was just a random example. But every culture has them, every person has them, and what we're seeing now is that technology is beginning to deliver them. In the moment, you as an individual feel a little more joy, a little more confident, a little calmer, a little less anxious, a little less subject to pain or fear. Just now. And that's a step toward happiness, and that, I think, is as much as we can ask of science right now, and what we're working to encourage with our investments.
So what is your approach to finding the next delightful moment investment candidate?
Well, it's not up to us. That's one thing we preach. In other words, it doesn't matter what I think. I'm old and white and American and all that. It's about the rising generation. So we say in the fund, the rising generation wins. I'll die, they don't. They get to, the game goes to them. Right? And so we study human behavior a lot. What's the rising generation doing? Why are they doing it? What are they trying to achieve in their life? What do they believe? What are they trying to get from one another? And we study changes in science and tech a lot, and we're trying to figure out where there's interesting, potentially valuable overlaps. And then our funds, I think differently. We're very volumetric. We're old geeks. We do things in a geeky way. So when we find an area that's interesting, we have a whole mess of tools. We try and light it up and find every brand new company in that area in the world. And then we try and meet with just about all of them. So we try and evaluate a lot of companies and learn a lot about what's going on to develop a sense of, if this is what's happening, there's an approach that seems like it has a better chance of succeeding than others, and we'll back it and help as best we can. We don't think it's possible to actually, at our stage, say that's the company. We're trying to get a set of companies whose potential to get to the level where these guys like them and back them is higher than normal. So I think we evaluated 3,100 companies in the first year of Joyance.
Great. So let's turn over to Steve. You've had some significant challenges in your life, and yet you have managed to climb Mount Everest. Why are you investing in transformative technologies?
Sure. So maybe a little bit different. I've been an entrepreneur for about almost 20 years now, and in the process, I've had a few successful exits, and also some challenges. When I was 24, I was diagnosed with a really rare cancer, and that set me off on this wonderful journey, starting with the folly of the medical system with an oncologist that the only thing he could see was chemotherapy. And despite education, the science said that wasn't what should be done. So I kind of had to pioneer on my own, and it took me to the edges of medicine to really understand that what we experience as medicine in our society is very different than actually what medicine is. And I think we all have watched documentaries on how we live in a society that's focused around our misfortune and our sickness rather than our well-being. And so for me being here, it's about helping people like you to advance your ideas, because I care about this topic. Because what I learned in the journey is that mind and heart and body are three separate things, and they matter, and when they're not aligned, we have problems. And so much of our illness has to do with how we experience the world, with our consciousness. And I think I probably am not alone when I say that some places I go, I'm a little bit weird. There's probably a few other people here that fall into that, and that's what I love about being here. So my ideal strategy is come here and talk with weird people. And what I'm really looking for is entrepreneurs who have passion for what they're doing, a deep purpose that see a different vision of the world, and are looking way out, and then have enough experience or knowledge to be able to push that forward. And it's really all about change. So if you have something, come talk to me.
So I guess we have a pitch fest coming up next. Maybe we can help the entrepreneurs who are going to come up stage to do a little bit better. So maybe let's go around and give each give the entrepreneurs one piece of advice on pitching to a VC. Start with you, Tim.
Wow. Okay, where to start? This will be interesting.
It can be a long list. We have plenty of time.
Yeah. Generally, I probably represent the traditional guard of the Sandhill VCs, and that's the cohort up till now. And when entrepreneurs pitch, maybe more established firms, just recognize that this area may or may not be within their strategic focus, so you might have to tie it to other sectors they might understand, whether that is health and wellness or commerce or enterprise or healthcare. And the danger of that is you might be putting square peg, round hole, that sort of thing, but you might have to adjust your language into business models that those kind of investors understand. Even for me, myself, I'm deeply passionate about the mission here, but I have to sort of shoehorn this thesis into existing areas of things like commerce or wellness or kind of like health tech, digital health, those sorts of things. And not to say that's the right answer, because you may be pioneering a whole new business model, but just expect that hesitation or that questioning, because it is a new area and it might have new models, but for a lot of investors, our jobs are pattern recognition, so we're trying to slot things into existing heuristics that fit well. So just realize that if you get resistance to that, that's kind of where that comes from. And so if when you build new habits, you piggyback on existing ones. So if you're able to paint, for example, what a direct-to-consumer entry strategy looks like and how that may be parallel or ahead of a B2B strategy, and if you do so, it's going through payers or employers or insurers, those sorts of things, just being able to delineate your go-to-market paths is probably a big one. I think people will be intrigued by the possibility of technologies, what's the cutting edge on the research and what the efficacy can show. Everyone is going to get tripped up on how do you commercialize and bring this to market, right? And I agree with Jeff's talk earlier. I'd love to see a reboot of capitalism, but in the near term, during these funding rounds, we're going to be using those traditional lenses of looking at those traditional business models. Are you SaaS? Are you freemium to subscription? Are you in-app purchase? Those are sort of the business model lingo terms that I think people are looking for. So you want to just be fluent in those and understand how to adapt your go-to-market strategy, the technology you have.
Thank you.
Should we just go this way? We invest at the very beginning, so the landscape looks a little different. At the very beginning, the biggest mistake entrepreneurs make before they come in the door, and I've never understood why, because they will be obsessive about researching their customers. They will be obsessive looking at the backgrounds of people they hire, and they walk into investors and assume we're all the same. They don't do that homework. They haven't looked at what areas we've been in. They haven't looked at the background of the team. They come in as if we're generic. We're just green. And we're all different. You can hear it up here. We're all different by backgrounds, the way we invest, the kinds of LPs we have. And so that's a big part of it. You're going to use different language, you're in a different environment at Mayfield than you are when you come see us. We don't even have an office. We're out in the market where the companies are. The thing that I would never say to somebody that your pitch should do this or do that, it's their company. The one thing I will say from a long career, having backed lots of companies in lots of technologies, I've not once seen a company succeed based on exactly the ideas they expressed in the pitch on the day they walked in the door.
Oh, yeah. That's right.
So that means it's great to have your pitch, but it's not what matters, because we know that's not the basis for your success. And so part of what we're looking for, and we're looking heavily at the individuals and the resilience of the underlying technology, is how you're going to react to change, because you don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what's going to happen. Your customers are human beings, which means they don't know what's going to happen. So a certain amount of chaos is going to ensue. And we are trying to understand whether this particular group of people in front of us, right now with the technology they have and the money they're asking for, are going to be ready for that extreme buffeting that they're about to go into. And then I think the third one goes back to, if you're going to start with a fund like ours and go on to Mayfield or one of these others, do you really have a business? Because most of the things that walk in the door aren't businesses, and most of the teams, they're products or they're attributes of products, or they're helpful in one way, but they're not businesses. And often teams don't even talk about that. The time is all spent talking about the product and not who are the customers and how you're going to get it to the customers and how you're going to get them to use it and why would they start using it and how are people going to react to that, and all of those business issues. So we say business model innovation creates more value than technological innovation. So what's the innovation in the business as a part of the product?
Great. So I look at things like entrepreneur, and for all the entrepreneurs in the room, you know it's not an easy journey. There are lots of times that giving up seems a lot easier than pushing on. So for me, I'm looking at people's experience when it's early stage and it's an idea. What are the examples of how you've overcome adversity in your life and pushed through and made that thing that you dreamed to do real? Where you've advanced a little bit further along, I'm really a fan of seeing consumers, people that are adapting a product, even if it's prototypes, people that use it, that have improvement, and really being able to tell that story in a meaningful way. Just walking some of the booths upstairs, that was one of the places that a few people gapped on. It's like, who's using this? Are they paying for it? Do they want to pay for it? Do you have any data for that? So I think really building that out to see that there's an initial group on a particular target customer gives an investor like me or anybody here a potential to see that could scale.
So I think you're picking up on some themes here. Number one, team, right? Absolutely. Number one thing that we're looking at when a new company walks in the door is the entrepreneur and whether or not that team around them can withstand the test of time, as Mike said. Number two is business model. How are you actually going to make money when you're bringing this technology, to the world? And like Tim was saying, there's a tremendous amount of innovation that needs to happen. And you need to think broadly about the different ways that you can potentially do that. And then lastly, the thing that in this space that's critically important, I think, for all of us to remember is because we're working on wellness and we're talking about improving human potential and enabling people to sort of reach those next levels in their lives, we really need to focus on clinical validation. And I mean hard clinical results, because if you don't have clinical results in a double-blind, placebo-controlled way, I don't know as an investor whether or not you're talking about something that's neat and interesting and works with your 17 friends or even 50 of them, or if it's something that's a complete breakthrough. And unless you can arm me with the data to be able to make an intelligent decision that, yes, this will get through the FUD in the marketplace, the fear, the uncertainty, the doubt, that the consumers out there will push upon whatever innovation that you're bringing to the world, unless you can break through that with hard data and a business model innovation and with the grit to be able to bring that to market, then it's going to be more difficult for us to write a 5, a 10, a $20 million check to be able to support you on your journey. So, at the beginning, you're not going to have all of this worked out. That's not what we're expecting. But when you come in, you should have thoughtfully sort of walk through all of this in your mind and know that these are some of the questions and some of the issues that we'll be sort of looking at.
Just commenting on that from the beginning, you should certainly have some of it.
Yep.
Or most of it. One of the other things, when we go to partner meeting, and I'm not sure about your partner meetings, but because it's the beginning and we're so volumetric, we might look at between 130 and 150 companies in a single partner meeting, at least to some degree. That means not just, do we like your company, but is it better than the other 149? Do we know? Do we have enough information to know it's better than the other, or believe we know it's better than the other 149? And so strong teams have done something. So we may have gotten the study of 8 people, which isn't really projectable, but is indicative, and it shows your head is in the direction of, I actually have to find out from the world whether this works. Simply saying it isn't the truth. At least I need to indicate there's some truth and a willingness to go engage out there and find out what the truth is, good, bad, or indifferent. And that's a big differentiator.
And I'll add one more thing, and this also sometimes depends on obviously who your target audience is. And when you're talking about a specific medical condition, it's one thing. There you know that there's a clear, need that you're addressing, and doctors will prescribe, and that's part of your go-to-market strategy. But what about, and I think this is very relevant in this space, is we're talking in some cases about technologies or products that are, most people will say are, maybe nice to have. So, maybe, and maybe it's kind of a luxury for us to focus on enhancing our human condition, right? So what's going to be the actual, motivation for someone to go out and actually buy your product? Like, why would they buy it? That's one thing that we look for. We also invest very, very early at the very beginning, but to get a feel for what the entrepreneur's vision is for the product. Why would someone go out and actually start using the product, but also continue to use the product and get hooked on the experience?
Yeah, it's not just buy, it's buy and use and continue to use and tell other people about it. I think you've heard from all of us, the flywheel you have to turn over to get new human behaviors, to get new things to happen is very large and very heavy, and it takes a lot of power to turn that flywheel over just to get the engine running. And it's much harder, I think, than just about every entrepreneur, at least first-time entrepreneur, imagines it could possibly be. And imagine the most difficult thing to turn in your experience, and it's harder than that. So you really got to have something. You're going to die tomorrow. This pill will keep you alive. That's a good one. But if you start coming down from that, there are always complexities and difficulties getting folks to accept the new.
So we have 2 options now. We can take questions from the audience. So if there are any questions, we can take those, and we can also have our panelists ask some questions.
I thought she was going to have us tap answers.
That was the backup plan.
Right.
Yes. Please stand up and speak.
Say it loud.
Speak up.
My name is Rajesh. My question is around consolidation. There's a lot of different technologies, different problems being tackled in the overall space in Transtech. What's your view in terms of how the market will shake out, and especially as investors, bringing companies together, technologies together? Could you speak a little bit to that? Anybody? I don't have a difference.
You're talking about consolidation? Yeah, what do you guys think? I mean, one area I do see it in is I've probably seen 42 meditation startups, and not sure we need another. But yeah, I mean, that'll probably be an area where we don't necessarily have like 80 of them that survive, but there could be some that form larger networks, and you'll see some M&A consolidation going on as well, too.
The consolidation that happens in the beginning is the consolidation of failure, which is actually a good thing. In other words, when something new emerges, there tends to be a lot of excitement about it, sort of a Cambrian spring. Everybody jumps on it. Everybody thinks it's the next big thing. Early in my career, it was interferon. It was going to cure everything. As those companies get going, as they hit humankind and they hit businesses, most of them fail, and their failures sort of leave trails behind. That didn't work, that didn't work, that didn't work. And companies that come into the market then learn from that And so there's no companies doing it, there's a ton of companies doing it, and then there's a few really spectacularly good companies doing it. And it's at that point that the real value starts to emerge. And part of our job, trying to figure out who those few companies are. We do okay in the middle, but it's the companies that really learn from that period of failure that become the big, long-lasting companies.
I think we're also going to see probably a consolidation of companies that will, you have some companies that are doing, for example, sensing only, and you have some companies that are somehow influencing our state, right? And then you have some companies that are doing kind of the assistant AI stuff, and so ultimately we may want to use kind of an all-in-one product, right? That kind of gives us everything that we need in order to make the change that we want to make. So it could very well be that there would be opportunities even in this room for companies to come together and bring their products together into one more comprehensive solution.
That's an excellent point, Mary.
Thank you, Zack.
I would say that we're far too early to expect consolidation in this market. It is very early days here. We need to see hundreds of more companies emerge in each one of these areas. I think your point around the convergence of different technologies to create more robust closed-loop systems that integrate a lot of these different, feature sets, if you will, is probably a trajectory that is naturally going to happen because single-point sort of features companies won't gain traction, and so the entrepreneurs and the ideas will morph into future companies. But I even think in the area of meditation, I think we're still early days there. I'm not able, because there are so many apps and approaches out there, to be able to pick the next space at this point because it's a pretty confusing market space. But I do believe that there are still leaps of technological innovation that will support and undergird meditation technologies going forward that we have yet to see yet. I still think it's really early to presume that we will start to see consolidation of multiple companies.
Even the idea that it's somehow centered on a phone in your pocket is an idea I don't think is going to last all that long.
Totally.
I think this brings us back to the importance of really connecting with the consumer. When you make a product, sometimes people are making a meditation app, but what is it actually doing for the consumer? I think it's so important for us to look at the future worldview and then understand how we're going to have impact for them. And I totally agree. It's a little bit hard to see whether it's going to be like search engines or like social media.
Right.
It's a little tricky.
One other thing we say at the fund is the rounding error wins the future, which means all of us sitting up here sort of straight line extrapolating from everything we know will almost certainly pick the wrong future. Nobody would have picked Netflix. Nobody would have picked all these kinds of things. They come obliquely and they surprise everybody, including folks like us, where some of us may wind up to be lucky enough to have money in those companies, but it's not because we necessarily analyzed perfectly and put them at the top of the stack.
Which is why it's such a great idea to be you, Mike, investing in a ton of different companies because it's so complicated, right?
Well, it's different. This is a long story. But if we can find companies that have the chance of success, for us, it's a wonderful thing to do. It's a wonderful way to spend time, whether the companies become the most valuable companies in human history or not. But if we do it right, and some of them turn out to be good, we'll have done both good and well, which would be terrific.
Let's take a couple more questions.
What each of you are doing in sort of examining what an entrepreneur looks like to have something that's more inclusive of people who don't necessarily look like you. Like, what are you doing to change things so that we can include more women in the investing space? Like, based on grit alone, I would think that you would be like going around throwing checks at like any woman who managed to like finish a STEM PhD.
Is my female PhD partner in the room? I don't know. Well, we look at a lot of entrepreneurs from a lot of places, and again, we don't care what an entrepreneur looks like, by gender, by race, by any of that. All people are different and all entrepreneurs are different. Almost every group of people will fail at almost every activity. So if you put us up against warriors, we're going to look like a bunch of jerks. And if you put the warriors up here, except maybe for Kevin Durant, they aren't going to be good at this. So we're looking at the appropriateness of that group of people, that leader, to that particular activity. And it doesn't mean that women do women-y things and men do men things. We have female founders who are 15-year engineers, and they're doing 15-year engineer type stuff, and they act like engineers, and they just happen to be female. So it's unique. We try very hard to be purely meritocratic, and we have a lot of different kinds of folks: old, young, Japanese, Chinese, American, all that. So we get a diversity of view inside the fund.
For me, it's a big part of knowing why you're here. It's a big question a lot of people struggle with, but as an entrepreneur, that answer being clear for me has made it easier so many times, because it's what else? What else would you be doing? So I also don't care what somebody looks like or where they come from. I do care about their experience, and so when they know why they're here, what are the examples of how you really understood that and pushed through adversity as a result?
I would agree. At Mayfield, we say people first, but what that breaks down to is looking for track record of excellence. The ideal scenario for us is a lot of times we're Series A, nothing might be built, so we just look at, is this a repeat founder? That's like the dream case, a repeat founder has a track record of successful exits. Naya Reeves from Trip is here. She's a great example of that. Built Jamdat, was at Gaikai Machinima. I've just been a fan of her for so long that she happened to pitch the idea for Trip, and which was a vision I'd been thinking about, and there was nothing built yet. It was some ideas, and we're like, let's write a check on this, because it's basically, that's an example of a repeat founder. For many of the founders in this room, you might be first time. One way around that, because we can't all be repeat founders till you found something, is to build your own personal advisory board and to work with other repeat founders who might become your angels and or direct advisors, and that's a way to get conferred credibility and get their wisdom on. That's a way to build sort of that ecosystem of wisdom around you if you're not that repeat founder yet first.
So as a female, what I do less formally is I mentor a lot of women entrepreneurs, and that has nothing to do with the process for selecting who I'm going to invest in. That's definitely purely by merit and not related to any other parameter of that defines the person. But offline, I work a lot with women entrepreneurs, and I try to help them figure out the process and give them advice. And I think that's super important to help as part of the effort to increase the amount of women that are also receiving funding for their startups. Yes.
My name's Ray. I'm curious, obviously having an innovative, demonstrated business model that actually makes money is kind of what you're looking for first and foremost. But when someone comes to pitch, I'm just trying to get it to our viewpoint. Let's say we're going to come pitch you. Everyone has to think, how am I going to do the pitch? So are there resources you would say are useful in that? The thing that comes to mind is there's that book out there, Pitch Anything. Is that a thing like where if someone reads that and they come in and they use that technique and you guys kind of see through that and you're like, that person just read Pitch Anything and, forget them? And then along those lines, I haven't done any kind of pitch, but I just read that from curiosity. They talk about dramatic moves and such, and when you were talking specifically about seeing 130 people in a day, I've been in hiring where I hire people, and it becomes a blur. So I couldn't imagine what it's like to have 130 people come through. Are there things that stand out in your mind that people do, aside from the business model itself? Is there something that makes them stand out among 130 people? So sort of along those lines.
Right. Well, again, at partner meeting, we go over 130 companies. We don't meet 130 companies in one day. Though a typical member of my team might easily meet 15 or 20 companies over the course of a week. 10 would be a very typical week. There's a lot in what you said, and So the experience, at least with us, may not be what you expect. So if you happen to meet my partner, Bill, you know, well, a practicing Zen Buddhist capitalist, and you show up with your deck and you're all ready to go, Bill may look at you and go, so your mother, she loved you? Did you grow up in a small town or a big city? Why did you think it was small? So, and the whole point of that is to sort of break through that carapace and sort of get to, so who are you really? Who are we talking to really? Not the show version, not the scripted version, but who's in there? Because that's really important, because we're giving money to you, not to your, you know, financials and that kind of thing. So the short form is tell the truth. Tell the truth. Be who you are. Be genuine about this idea. What do entrepreneurs not do in these sessions? They think they're there to pitch. Why don't they come and talk? They very rarely ask me questions, which is crazy. Because they don't know what I'm thinking if they're not asking questions. We go through a 45-minute and they talk the whole time, and I get up and I leave and they have no idea what just happened. They never once asked, so do you believe any of this? Do you agree with any of it? Because they're so determined to get it out there. So relax and actually talk. Find out something about the person on the other end of the table and what's motivating them, and then find the points of commonality and all that, just as you would in any other normal situation.
Mike nailed it. So it's be authentic and have a conversation. You don't even need to show slides. The best pitches I've ever had are 5 to 10, 15-minute conversations. I'm enthralled, I'm engaged, I get it. Wow, you really know your subject matter. I've never seen a slide.
Yeah.
So thank you very much to our panelists. Apparently we're out of time. I hope this was interesting for you all and insightful. And of course, you're very welcome to come speak with us. And guess we'll move on to the Pitch Fest.